who was responsible for prosecuting many of the people on January 6th, never once charged anybody with violating 18 U.S.C. section 2383. You never charged anybody with violating that statute. Capitol Police was not dealing with just the force division, but also with the fact that 500 bike racks had been removed the night before. Who ordered the removal of the 500 bike racks and why?
Welcome back to Freedom Forge, where we forge truth in the fires of liberty and never back down from defending our Constitution and our country. If you're tired of the mainstream narrative and want honest, unfiltered takes on the biggest issues facing America, this is the place for you. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our deep dives into the news the establishment media wants you to ignore. Today, we're breaking down a recent Senate hearing that, frankly, exposes just how deep the rot goes in D.C. and how the so-called investigations into January 6th have been more about pushing a political narrative than actually seeking the truth.
The member indicated that the first lesson that you teach lawyers is you better bring the evidence with you. But another lesson that we learn is that you should also know the elements of the crime and the relevant statute if you're going to claim that somebody committed a crime. It's a pretty slimy tactic to use the word insurrection over and over and over and over and over again, and yet try to hide the fact that the gentleman who's sitting here before us today, who was responsible for prosecuting many of the people on January 6th, never once charged anybody with violating 18 U.S.C. section 2383. You never charged anybody with violating that statute. You never convicted anybody with violating that statute. So sitting here and using that word over and over again means absolutely nothing. We are here today focusing on the pipe bomb because of what happened that day. It clearly played a pivotal role in facilitating the breach of the Capitol, and we need to get to the bottom of what happened there. These devices were discovered outside the RNC and DNC within 20 minutes of the joint session, and the U.S. Capitol Police were forced to defy the forces while a crowd of protesters moved towards the Capitol. The U.S. Capitol Police was not dealing with just the force division, but also with the fact that 500 bike racks had been removed the night before. Who ordered the removal of the 500 bike racks and why? The staff of the architect of the Capitol testified that the evening of January 5th, roughly around the time the pipe bombs were allegedly planted, the order came down to remove 500 bike racks from around the Capitol. Mr. Pajota, can bike racks help law enforcement with crowd control and deterrence?
Absolutely. They form a physical barrier between the crowd and a protected location, or they can be used to help funnel a crowd to or from a location.
Well, can they also serve as a visual cue for non-law enforcement personnel about what lines they are not allowed to cross? And could removing them spell legal jeopardy for protesters who cannot identify what is the line of trespass?
It creates ambiguity for the public. They don't know where those barriers are.
And did this actually result in legal jeopardy for many of the people who were on the Capitol grounds on January 6th?
It ended up that way.
Okay. According to the Select January 6th Committee's final report, quote, at 1:28 p.m., the U.S. Capitol Police requested the AOC to deliver 400 additional bike racks to the East Front to serve as protective barriers, even though rioters were using bike racks as weapons. The pipe bomb discovery at the DNC prevented the AOC from delivering them, end quote. Clearly, the Capitol Police viewed the bike racks as a necessary tool for that day, and their removal is absolutely baffling. And this subcommittee should focus on identifying who gave that order, why, when, who was involved. We need to get to the bottom of this. And the previous January 6th committee didn't look into it. They're not the ones who actually investigated what happened here and why. This statement is also clear that the impacts of the pipe bombs continue to be felt by the U.S. Capitol Police officers responding to the incident. And Mr. Pajota, does this raise even more questions about why the Ray FBI did not take this pipe bomb investigation seriously?
The Ray FBI did not prioritize this investigation. Again, I think their resources and their attention was split into the other events of January 6th. And over time, what we saw was I would say, a weak or inept case management approach where this investigation eventually stalled.
Okay. Mr. Especial, do you have anything that you would like to briefly add to the discussion today?
I think that probably the biggest takeaway in all of this is that there are 1,600 American citizens that were baited into a trespass trap to a great extent. Yes, certainly, absolutely, some of them were violent, and investigations and prosecutions were warranted. But I have an estimate that it was almost $1 billion that was spent on prosecuting American citizens. It's a lot of money that we spent on trying to prosecute patriotic American citizens, and then you add on top of that the thousands of American citizens that, like myself, that were also weaponized against in order for deterrence purposes, all the tactical resources. It was really a terror campaign. I would refer you to the National Counterterrorism reports available on my website, and it's highlighted where they want an FBI domestic terrorism statute, quote, for deterrence purposes. They want to be able to silence free speech. They did that with all of this. And, the cause, bottom line is 51 intelligence officers memo, Hunter Biden laptop. It's all these things where the American citizens that showed up that day were at their wits' end on having faith in their government. And they were vulnerable. As I warned, they were vulnerable.
Well, and I think Hunter Biden is a good name to bring forward when you talk to with Mr. Romano here when we talk about the appropriateness of pardons. Mr. Nance, do you have anything to very briefly add?
I think one of the biggest things that the American people need to take away from this is the understanding that how dangerous narrative-led investigations can be. Because I think what we have going on here in large measure are narratives driven by the Biden White House through the Garland DOJ, and these are, of course, communications happening, headquarters to headquarters. And Director Wray, as any leader can present the commander's intent without explicitly doing so. So if he's getting communications from his boss, who is the Attorney General, that the narrative needs to be, we need to prioritize and stick with the J6 insurrection narrative, the pipe bomber narrative, or the pipe bomber investigation, in my opinion, was deprioritized because of that narrative coming from potentially the White House.
Well, I appreciate your testimony. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to expose this. With that, I yield back.
So let me lay the groundwork for what this hearing was about. This wasn't just another rehash of the events of January 6th. This was a hearing focused on the security failures, the mysterious decisions made in the hours leading up to the Capitol breach, and the government's suspiciously lackluster investigation into the pipe bombs that were discovered at the RNC and DNC. This hearing featured testimony that challenged the entire premise of the insurrection narrative and raised serious questions about whether the American people have been told the whole truth about what happened that day. Let's start with Representative Hageman's absolutely spot-on challenge to the use of the word insurrection. If you've watched even a minute of mainstream coverage, you've heard that word thrown around more times than you can count. The left and their media allies want you to believe that January 6th was an insurrection, a violent attempt to overthrow the government. But here's the kicker. Despite all the grandstanding, not a single person has been charged with insurrection under 18 U.S.C. Section 2383. Not one. Think about that. The prosecutors who have thrown the book at hundreds of Americans, ruining lives, bankrupting families, locking people up pre-trial for years, they never once charged anyone with the actual crime of insurrection. Why? Because they know they can't make it stick. Because the facts don't support it. Yet the narrative persists, repeated ad nauseum, to justify every new attack on our rights, from surveillance to censorship. Now, let's talk about something that's gotten almost zero coverage. Those 500 bike racks that were mysteriously removed from around the Capitol on the evening of January 5th. This is critically important. Those bike racks weren't just there for decoration. They serve as physical barriers. They help law enforcement control crowds, And just as importantly, they create a clear, visual line that tells people this is as far as you can go. When those barriers disappeared, it created chaos and confusion. Protesters, many of them patriotic Americans who came to peacefully express their First Amendment rights, no longer knew where the legal boundaries were. This isn't speculation. Even the witnesses at the hearing admitted that removing the bike racks made it ambiguous for people on the ground. And as a result, hundreds, maybe thousands of Americans found themselves caught in what I consider a trespass trap. Why were those racks removed? Who gave the order? Why did it happen at the exact time the supposed pipe bombs were being planted? The staff of the architect of the Capitol said the order came down the night before, just as the city was bracing for a massive protest, and just as pipe bombs were being placed. That timing is either the world's biggest coincidence, or there's something more to the story. These are the kinds of questions that the previous January 6th committee didn't even bother to ask. Why not? If you're interested in the truth, you follow every lead. You investigate every suspicious decision. But that's not what happened. Fast forward to the chaos on January 6th. At 1:28 p.m., while the Capitol was being breached, the police realized they needed those bike racks back. 400 more, to be precise, to try to regain control. But they couldn't get them. Why? Because the discovery of the pipe bomb at the DNC tied up resources and prevented delivery. So let's get this straight. Bike racks are mysteriously removed, chaos erupts, and then when law enforcement needs those barriers desperately, a conveniently timed bomb scare keeps them from being delivered. If that doesn't raise red flags, I don't know what does. And what about the FBI's investigation into the pipe bombs? According to the witnesses, the FBI essentially deprioritized the case. They let it stall. That's right, the same FBI that has spent years, billions of dollars, and every available resource hunting down grandmas and veterans for trespassing on Capitol grounds can't seem to find the person who planted real bombs outside the headquarters of both major political parties. Does that sound like an agency pursuing justice? Or does it sound like an agency more interested in political theater and narrative control? One witness hit the nail on the head. The response to January 6th turned into a terror campaign against patriotic Americans. Nearly $1 billion spent prosecuting American citizens. Thousands more targeted for deterrence purposes, to send a message, to scare you into silence. This isn't law enforcement, folks. This is a political purge. And the establishment wants you to be afraid to speak your mind, afraid to protest, afraid to question the narrative. Let's not forget the role of the Biden White House and the Garland DOJ. According to testimony, the narrative was driven from the top down. The insurrection story had to be pushed at all costs, even if it meant sidelining important investigations or letting real threats go unpunished. This is not how a free society operates. This is how banana republics operate, where the law is just a tool for those in power to crush their opponents. And where was the original January 6th committee on all of this? Nowhere. They didn't ask about the bike racks. They didn't dig into the security failures. They didn't care about the pipe bomb investigation. All they cared about was making sure the insurrection narrative stuck so they could weaponize it against anyone who opposes their agenda. So, here's my take as a proud American and patriot. We have every right to be furious about what's come to light in this hearing. Our fellow citizens have been railroaded. Our institutions have been corrupted, and the truth is still being hidden from us. We need real investigations. We need accountability for the people who made these disastrous decisions. And we need to stop letting the left define every protest, every act of dissent as insurrection just because it's politically convenient for them. If you agree, if you believe in holding the government accountable and defending our freedoms, help us get this message out. Like this video, subscribe to Freedom Forge, and share this with every American you know who's tired of the lies and tired of the narrative. The only way we reclaim our country is by standing together and demanding the truth. This is Freedom Forge, where we stand for liberty, for truth, and for the American people. Until next time, stay vigilant, keep asking questions, and never let them silence your voice.